My golden brother hired a private investigator to expose me as a failure, but instead, he uncovered my multi-million-dollar success. I was raised in a quaint little village with my 2 siblings. The middle sibling is me. The fact that everyone there knows one another can be both a strength and a weakness. My father is the kind of man who puts in a lot of work but keeps his emotions to himself. He is now thinking about retiring. My mother is the total opposite of him. She has consistently maintained the house and upheld the traditional ideals she was taught growing up. My parents are both from traditional religious families. They are my parents, and I love them. But I've always felt that I didn't live up to their standards. The fact that they appear to view me as the family's disappointment hurts. In contrast, my older brother is the family's golden boy. At 40, he settled down and married a calm, reticent woman. Their 2 sons have a strong interest in sports, particularly rough-and-tumble sports. To put it mildly, they're a pain. My brother appears to feel it is his duty to guide me in life. He works as a car salesperson at a local dealership. His mentorship, however, feels more like him treating me like a project he can't manage, as if I'm always in need of assistance, and should be appreciative of any time he spends with me. He presents a picture of a wonderful existence, talking about his athletic children, his powerboat, and his ATVs, but his counsel frequently comes off as boasting about his big house, fancy cars, and his so-called trophy wife. I feel even more alone as a result of this. I was the sensitive child at school who frequently broke down in tears and appeared to always find an excuse for why things didn't go as planned. I wasn't a strong, tough child or athletic. As an alternative, I was made fun of and kept out of most activities. Having asthma made me feel even more alienated. The worst thing? Asthma is not considered a significant medical problem by my parents. Furthermore, I have battled depression for as long as I can remember. I was never the kind of child who could run down a field or throw a football straight. My parents frequently made remarks about how I wasn't as intelligent or gregarious as my older brother, and frequently made comparisons between us. School was challenging. I had a poor 2.5 GPA when I graduated from high school. After saving up some cash, I enrolled in college, but I left in my 2nd year. A family controversy resulted from such a choice. In a sense, my younger sister was the princess of the family. I don't know much about her because I left when she was a teenager. The main reason I feel this way about her is because I have seen her as an adult. She is not a horrible person and is merely a little overindulged. But maybe because it's simpler than being the target herself, she frequently treats me the same way my parents and brother do. She had a beautiful wedding, was married when she was 19, and has 3 kids now. I can best identify with her middle child. I guess I see a little of myself in her because she's also the middle child. She gets mocked a lot, and maybe because her problems are similar to mine, I feel like I know her better. After I graduated from college, I really began to embrace my nerdy side. Before it closed more than 7 years ago, I worked at a comic book and video game store in my community, which I really enjoyed. Even though I have moved on, my parents still behave as though I work there. The best part of my position at the store was getting to know another geek with huge ambitions. We co-founded a successful IT support business together. My business partner ultimately made the decision to sell our company to a bigger corporation. I was bought out with cash and stock options as part of the deal, and it worked out rather well. I started a few side projects and made a number of wise investments, several of which were quite profitable. I try not to brag, but I have more than $1 million in assets. I currently work for a brand new private startup as its CTO. Even though I'm wealthy, I live a humble life. All of the furnishings in my comfortable 2-bedroom house in a fantastic area are used, and I drive a 15-year-old Saturn. Right now, I'm not in a relationship. I have a hectic life and see my therapist on a regular basis. Like my melancholy and asthma, I deal with drinking, which is difficult because my parents don't take it seriously. They believe it to be wholly mental, even if it's not what other people anticipate or comprehend. I've been able to carve out a prosperous career for myself in spite of the ups and downs. My parents expect me to join them for supper every Sunday night. They live on the opposite side of the state, so the travel is not quick. It takes 90 to 120 minutes each way, which eats up over half of my weekend. They still seem to think that, as an unmarried individual, and what my brother likes to refer to as a mental case. I have nothing better to do. These meals are frequently difficult. I get unsolicited advice on how to marry, establish a family, and be a proper adult for 3 hours. Or I sit through lengthy conversations about my brother's most recent huge sale at the car dealership, which is the buzz of the table. Although they have never called me a mooch directly, the implication is there. If I skip one of these dinners, it is both frustrating and perplexing. I frequently question why I still go to these events. When I talk to my therapist, my family has a tendency to downplay or misrepresent all of my accomplishments. People back home still think I work at the long-gone game store. My brother was seen as more mature and gregarious than I was, and he had a successful profession as a result. I was continuously made fun of for my prior retail experience. I found it challenging to communicate to my family back home the truth about my life and my achievements because of this disparity. Games and comics were sometimes written off as immature entertainment, despite my genuine expertise in technology. My attempts to discuss it were typically overshadowed. My brother would interrupt me and pretend as if I didn't know anything, even though I knew he was babbling. I typically just listened to him. I was scared to correct him since I would have to explain my work and defend my knowledge. I secretly feared that they wouldn't value my career and that it would alter their opinion of me. I'll confess that I've had difficulties and occasionally been a complete mess. However, everything changed last month. My brother managed to get his hands on some of my personal information. The truth is that he employed a private investigator to carry out what he said was a background check on my employment. I had a sneaking suspicion that he was organizing an intervention with my folks. They were totally unprepared for what they discovered. They learned my actual value as a person, that I didn't live in a rundown flat, and other private information. Since I work in security. This was very ironic. After making the connections, I was even able to track out the source of the hack by receiving notifications about unauthorized attempts to get my credit report. Everything became clear. After this revelation, I now have to deal with my family's abrupt and unanticipated change in how they view me. It's a lot to take in, particularly in light of our relationship's history of miscommunication and undervaluation. I chose to have the same private detective firm look into my brother's finances since I was so upset over the breach of my privacy. My brother was actually living well beyond his means. A file with Child Protective Services, several previous arrests for DWI and public intoxication, and domestic disturbance calls were also discovered throughout the investigation. He was having trouble making his scheduled back payments to the IRS and managing 3 mortgage loans on his house, despite the fact that there were currently no ongoing charges. His credit was a total mess. In contrast, my parents had little more than what I already knew and lived modest lifestyles. When it came to money, they were realistic and pragmatic. I was so concentrated on getting ready to confront my family at the next meal, hoping it would cause a rift, that I didn't even care to see how my sister was doing. But the dinner's atmosphere was completely different from what I had imagined. My parents started to treat me with a strange sort of veneration, as if I were the golden child. This adjustment obviously distressed my brother. He lost his anger midway through dinner. In an attempt to restore his reputation, he began boasting about recent sales commissions and a purported promotion. I just gave him my congratulations and mentioned his debt, IRS problems, and stretched credit condition in a tactful manner. In other words, I called attention to my brother's financial disaster while simultaneously celebrating his accomplishments. The whole thing was oddly gloomy. The already challenging family dynamic was made even more awkward by my parents' sudden change in behavior toward me, which appeared forced and artificial at first. My brother disputed everything when I handed him a copy of the report, but I pointed out that, by utilizing the agency to look into me, he had inadvertently suggested it. I have to say, that felt good for a little while. My parents, who reprimanded him and responded with dramatic shock, were obviously aware of it as well. The whole thing became very unsettling. Because the report needed my social security number, it was not a pleasant revelation or the ensuing argument, as it revealed my family's avarice and cowardice. My disdain for them grew. They started accusing one another of a variety of things throughout the course of the following hour. I made every effort to keep quiet, but sometimes they became irate with me. I would either shrug or respond with a nonchalant one-word comment when that occurred. My sister's husband, my brother's wife, and their 5 kids looked on in shock as our family disintegrated like never before. Our meetings were typically routine and uninteresting. My sister would give updates whenever she could. My brother and his wife would boast about their lives, my mom would strike up a conversation, and my dad would complain in response. This collapse had never occurred during one of our family dinners. It was a tumultuous meal, to say the least, as long-simmering, deeply ingrained issues exploded into the open. The customary subtle jabs about how I should look up to my brother and be a real man were replaced by astonished quiet. I got into a heated disagreement with my dad, brother, and myself. They dug up every relic of family strife from the previous 30 years and argued over who was responsible for everything. It was like watching an unruly drama play out in real time. All of my negative thoughts about my family seemed to be validated during such instances. In all honesty, I felt terrible. Even though you might have expected me to feel some sort of justice or triumph, I became aware of my poor handling of the situation. Although I was well aware of these flaws, what had I meant to accomplish by making my brother's wrongdoings public? His children now know about his tumultuous history, which I had not wanted them to. When my brother yelled at me in a fit of wrath, this situation reached a breaking point. His harsh statements, such as, "You should have never been born," were stunning. But what really stuck out was my parents' desperate attempts to calm him down, a degree of desperation I had never witnessed before. He accused me of being the cause of all the family's problems. They made an effort to intervene, but they never really admitted or accepted responsibility for the way they had treated me throughout the years. I was both very saddened and vindicated. It served as a harsh and obvious reminder of the underlying problems in our family's dynamics. My parents accused me of something else until I could take it no more. They implied that I could have helped but decided not to, claiming that I was refusing to help a sick niece or nephew. I had no knowledge of such a circumstance. No one had ever told me about this issue or reached out to me for help. I suspected they were making things up as they went along, but I didn't challenge it. "I thought you believed I was still working at the comic book shop," I reminded them instead. They never seemed to understand that the store had closed in 2011. Even though I had reminded them several times, the way they had misrepresented our family history to fit their storyline appalled me. I drove home afterward, feeling overburdened and annoyed. I'm feeling conflicted right now. Knowing that they would probably put pressure on me to repay them, now that they are aware of my money, makes me feel deceived. I know what's coming because I've witnessed how they treated my brother in a similar manner. However, I also recognize and value the fact that my parents provided for my basic needs as a child, including clothing, food, and housing. It will be difficult to navigate this labyrinth of thankfulness, bitterness, and freshly set boundaries. I'll probably need my therapist's assistance to process this change in dynamics. It's obvious that establishing clear limits going forward will be essential. Growing up was challenging because, to be honest, I was never the favorite child in my family. My brother mistreated me, but my parents did little to stop it. Even though they never physically beat me. My parents responded as though nothing was wrong whether he kicked, hit, or said extremely terrible things. They completely disregarded it. It is really concerning that they do not consider verbal abuse to be damaging or real. Verbal abuse is terrible in and of itself. But it is even more painful when the people who are there to protect you choose to ignore it. I've had enough of fighting this for years. Even though I am aware that they are my family, I feel the need to keep a permanent distance. Although I wish them well, I think it will be better for me to go on and begin a new chapter without them. If I discover someone amazing, like a girlfriend, and we decide to get married and have kids, what will happen then? How will I deal with these problems with my family? It may get rather complicated. So I'm attempting to figure it out. How can I introduce my new family to my family if I'm not talking to them anymore? I have a lot of questions about what lies ahead. Prior to reading the update, allow me to give you some advice. Your family didn't appreciate you as a person. If they merely wanted you around to boost their self-esteem, they want you around to take advantage of your wealth now that they are aware of your financial achievement. You are not defined by your family. According to everything you've said, they, not you, are the issue. You come across as a good-hearted, diligent individual who endured harsh treatment in your family's circumstances. Put your phone away and carry on with your life. You've done a great job creating your own life. Reduce the amount of time you spend with your family as much as you like. They only want your money, and you know it. As a result, you can communicate with them however you see fit. Stay in touch with your therapist to help you move into a life where they don't hold you back. Steer clear of pointless conversations if at all possible. Think about relocating to a new place, packing up your things, and starting over. You are not alone. If you have to make tough choices, because many people struggle with their families, when it comes to dating, explaining these dynamics to a potential spouse might be challenging, particularly if they have tight family ties. But you will start your own family when the time is right. Actions to take going ahead. If you haven't done so, put a security freeze on your credit accounts. If your brother used dealership resources to collect information about you, let the appropriate parties know. The dealership is unlikely to be amenable to being implicated if his activities involved fraud. Speak with an attorney. Despite your youth, mishaps do occur. Your parents would currently inherit your assets as your default next of kin. Put it in writing as soon as you can if you would rather have someone else be the beneficiary. Locate a trustworthy counselor. You may feel sad about being apart from your family in the upcoming months. Speaking with an expert will assist you in processing this. Update. Following the family dinner argument, it was like leaving a battle zone. When I got home, I flew across the quiet nighttime road with nothing but my thoughts. I knew that something needed to change. As soon as I pulled into my driveway, I realized that if I didn't want to go insane, I had to quit throwing family dinners. I concentrated on my work and mental well-being during the course of the following 2 weeks. Not only were the gadgets and comic books strewn over my home visually appealing, but they served as a sanctuary for me. In order to figure out how to separate from my family without totally alienating them, I stepped up my therapy appointments during this period. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, was really helpful. He used methods that felt more like building a fort than a wall to help me set boundaries. My mind started to go toward the future more, especially relationships. As the weeks went by and the temperature rose, I began to think that meeting someone amazing was not just possible but likely after spending time by myself and without a partner. Then, like something from a comic book, Ava showed up. Ava and I met at a technology conference. Her cybersecurity talk captivated me, not just because of the topic but also because of her charisma. She was smart and grounded, understood me, and had a love-centered view of families that was restrained by firm boundaries. As Ava's situation worsened, the unsaid problem was how to introduce her to my family's circus. We discussed how to deal with it over numerous pizza-eating evenings. We made the decision to have short, visible, and casual family get-togethers. Everything changed when Ava even offered to help me. Our initial interactions were straightforward coffee dates. I reintroduced myself to family gatherings while Ava was around. Naturally, the first few times were really uncomfortable. My parents were too polite and wary, as though I might vanish at any moment. In contrast, my brother looked to be attempting to express a lot but was having trouble finding the perfect words. But my sister and her kids were a pleasant diversion. My sister's middle child, who looked a lot like me, was instantly won over by Ava. We became accustomed to these coffee dates, which were like short forays into family territory, a brief coming and going. I was able to reconnect without becoming entangled in the chaos, thanks to this strategy. Unexpectedly, it started to function. My family adjusted to the arrangement over time. Maybe they understood that this was the only way they could continue to have me in their life. They began to be mindful of my limits. As things got better, I started to consider the long term more. What might the future hold for us together? With Ava, I envisioned building a solid family foundation based on respect and caring for one another rather than obligation and guilt. I knew there would be difficulties, of course. Ava and I talked about the prospect of living together one summer evening when we were walking by the lake. I was struck by how far I had come. From feeling abandoned by my family to being able to stand on my own with a better sense of who I was. It seemed like day and night. I have a cautious sense of optimism for the future. I feel prepared, even though I know the road ahead may be rough, with possible potholes the size of craters. Setting limits with my family after Ava was more than simply a matter of protecting myself. It was about making room for new connections and a fulfilling future for myself. The infamous Sunday meals are still planned, but they now take place according to my preferences. I go occasionally and don't go other times. I bring Ava along to family dinners, and we discuss any issues that arise. Even though there has been a lot of improvement, there are still issues. The secret is finding that balance, keeping things harmonious without becoming overpowered. Hi everyone, I'm still learning how to share stuff online, so please be patient with me. I want to tell you everything that's going on in my life at the moment. Let's start by introducing the main characters. I am the storyteller. Peach is our daughter. Mario is our son. And Daisy is my soon-to-be ex-wife. We are currently going through a challenging separation that is quickly turning into a very acrimonious divorce. The main reason Daisy and I are divorcing is that she accepted her bisexuality earlier this year. She expressed her desire for our marriage to be open to me directly. I was not at all comfortable with that notion. When I learned that Daisy had slept with my coworker, who is also one of my closest friends, the situation got even worse. That must have been terrible and awkward. It seemed like a betrayal from both my household and my place of employment as a police officer. We were unable to stay together after that. I took a break to think things out. Daisy did everything she could to keep us together at first, but when it became apparent that I was adamant about not opening our marriage, despite her reasons and entreaties, things took a nasty turn. Daisy's perspective had changed. She became bitter, and the last thing I wanted was for her to start playing pawns with our kids. Daisy started telling Peach that she had to leave our home because I no longer loved them. I detested them, she said, and I was destroying our family. It was heartbreaking to hear that, especially in light of Peach's obvious confusion and grief. Our kids frequently visit Daisy's mother's home, where she currently resides. Daisy and her new friend attempt to make these visits seem like a huge, thrilling vacation, presumably in an attempt to play the cool parents and turn Peach and Mario against me. They lavish them with toys and candy. In addition to our mental struggle, Daisy and I disagree on nearly everything. This involves deciding who should inherit what belongings and how much money one of us should contribute to support the other. The hardest part, though, is choosing how to split up Mario and Peach's time. Daisy fights back against every compromise we try to reach. She seems to be making things more difficult for herself. Daisy has been telling our kids things lately that make me the bad guy, which is unjust. For example, Peach and Mario have been asking me whether I don't like Daisy's new friend, AP. Let's call them AP. AP seems to adore them more than I do for whatever reason. Such talk is a major disturbance to their minds. I was working on a big project at work a few weeks ago. I was working much more overtime in my pursuit of a promotion from police officer to homicide investigator. Daisy and I agreed that the kids would spend this busy time with her and come see me on the weekends. I would stop by when it was time for them to go. For Daisy's, Mario exclaimed, tears in his eyes. Are you taking us away because you hate us like your mother says? As I handed him his luggage, a big one I had packed for him. The moment was heartbreaking. I hugged him tightly and assured him that I truly loved him, even though it wasn't true. It was strange. Despite my best efforts to visit them last weekend, it was really challenging. It hurt a lot that they didn't say much to me. They didn't seem to want to see me at all. It wasn't until today that I had another opportunity to talk to them. They both looked very sad as I lifted them up. I could now talk to them as I picked them up. It was clear that Peach is having difficulties, even while she still shows her love for me. Daisy seems to be making it harder for her to do so. Given how difficult the situation is, I'm attempting to decide on the best course of action to reduce the harm to the kids. This kind of twisting of family dynamics can be extremely challenging. Peach is having a lot of trouble because she believes she is incapable of loving me. I can no longer watch helplessly as my princess endures pain. Since this divorce is purposefully harming them, I'm beginning to have my doubts. Do I need to take the divorce further? Is it possible to proceed while keeping my kids safe, or should I just stay and accept it? Now for the comment. You need to tell your divorce attorney about all of this right away. Parental alienation is what this is. A judge will definitely order it to halt, but it will probably be hard to enforce. You have to get started on this right away and keep going. Daisy is acting in a way that is really damaging. Make sure you pursue the divorce and keep all the paperwork. It will only become worse if you stay. This is known as parental alienation. And it played a significant role in my friend's child custody victory because his ex-wife was acting in a similar manner. Engage a lawyer as soon as possible and record Daisy's actions. Seek the children's medical attention. This is a very bad position for them. Your kids shouldn't be left with her unattended. Tell your lawyer what she did. Inform CPS about her treatment of the kids if necessary. Never again let her actions go unchecked for the sake of your kids. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My parents rejected me when I chose a blue-collar life, but now they want back in. Am I the asshole for refusing to help? Growing up in a wealthy Chicago suburb with a father who is a well-known professor at Northwestern University and a mother who is the stereotypical faculty wife, I, 35F, have always been the challenging twin. Early on, I discovered that I was supposed to take a very certain route, the ideal daughter. My 35F twin sister accepted everything our parents desired. She epitomizes all of our parents' dreams, married a wealthy lawyer, and lives in a lovely home in Lincoln Park. From my earliest recollections, our house resembled a meticulously organized museum, with each item having its own location. While my mother's realm was the spotless living room where she invited faculty spouses for afternoon tea, my father's study was crammed with leather-bound volumes and academic honors. My sister and I were expected to be living examples of their success, even as kids, well-groomed, well-behaved, and constantly successful. Early on, the difference between us became apparent. My sister was very good in charm school and piano recitals, but I liked to lose myself in science fiction books and watch motorcycle races on TV in secret. Our mother's constant correction was the answer. Sit up straight, sweetheart. Don't cross your legs. Cross your ankles. Every instruction was given with a smile that never quite made it to her eyes. Do try to smile more. The pressure definitely increased in high school. My sister became a member of every club that was relevant to her, including the debate team, student government, and Young Republicans. Despite being compelled to do so, I didn't want to. I proposed setting up a fundraiser for a nearby motorcycle maintenance training program for at-risk teenagers during a particularly memorable student council meeting. For weeks, I was plagued by the terrified expression on my mother's face when she learned about it. The impact of our father was not limited to our household. He was well known in Chicago's intellectual and corporate circles as a renowned economics professor at Northwestern. These relationships served as the foundation for our futures and were more than just social capital. Through his network, every summer internship, college application, and employment opportunity was meticulously planned. I can still clearly recall the day he declared that he had gotten me accepted into Northwestern's economics program. I was shoving the remnants of my mother's expertly presented roast beef around in our formal dining room. He said, "It's all arranged," without raising his gaze from his wine glass. "Professor Richardson owes me a favor. You'll start in the fall." From the other side of the table, my sister, who was already in her second year of business administration, smiled. I could feel the walls closing in, yet I was at a loss for words. My life has always gone like that. I follow the meticulously prepared tracks, even if my inner voice begs for a different course. Because it's what responsible young ladies do. I earned my MBA. I chose to work in corporate strategy at one of the best companies in Chicago because it's a fantastic opportunity. My entire career has been a masterclass in following expectations rather than pursuing my own desires. My everyday schedule is the ideal representation of the life I should aspire to. My wake-up time is 5:30 a.m. My mother picked my high-rise apartment on Michigan Avenue since it's a popular place for young, successful professionals to dwell. During required shopping trips with my mother and sister, I wore designer suits that were more expensive than other people's monthly rent. My mother constantly adds, "Appearance is everything in the business world, dear," suggesting a more conservative heel height, or changing my collar. People who are living examples of what my parents want me to be are all around me at work. On most days, I hardly notice the breathtaking view of Lake Michigan from my 47th floor corner office. Rather, I meet with people who seem to actually care about quarterly estimates and shareholder value. For hours on end, I discuss market strategies and profit margins with a passion I can't seem to summon. They enthuse about their vacation houses in Lake Forest, their children's private schools, and their memberships in country clubs. In an effort to keep us close, our mother insists that my sister come to lunch with me every Wednesday. Perfectly groomed and typically fresh from a board meeting at one of her numerous charitable organizations, she comes at precisely 12:30. She tells me about her picture-perfect life over expensive salads at the trendy restaurant below, including her husband's recent high-profile case, their plans to buy a second house in Aspen, and the prestigious daycare where their child is already on the waitlist. She gently wiped her lips with a handkerchief last week and advised me, "You should join the junior league. Mother thinks it would be good for your social connections. Besides, you need to start thinking about marriage. All the best eligible men are involved in charity work." I instinctively agreed, as I've come to do when my family offers advice on how to live my life. In all honesty, this world of manufactured perfection is smothering me. While my colleagues enthusiastically debate market penetration tactics and hostile takeovers in meetings, I can't help but stare at the construction workers in the building across the street. They're making something substantial, doing something real. I can be so envious of them at times that it hurts. I found myself scribbling motorcycle ideas in the margins of my notes during a particularly dull budget discussion last month. Upon noticing, my direct report looked at me with anxiety. I promptly turned to a blank page and made myself concentrate on the supply chain efficiency optimization PowerPoint presentation. I heard him express concern to another manager later that day over my dedication to the company's mission. Weekends are the worst. I'm stuck driving through the city's industrial areas while my sister and her husband go to country club parties and charity galas. I pretend that I'm working late, but in reality, I'm drawn to the unadulterated, authentic elements of Chicago that they deny exist. I observe those who make things with their hands and appear to truly like what they do, such as welders at their shops, artists in their studios, and mechanics working on automobiles. Everything changed last night. My BMW, my father's thoughtfully selected graduation present, began to make a menacing grinding sound after yet another heartbreaking day of acting as though I cared about market forecasts. I was in the wrong part of town, as my mother used to say, but I had to stop or risk getting stuck. Just before closing time, I stopped into a nearby auto repair shop and saw the check engine light flash mockingly. I met Jake at that time. With a welding torch in hand, Jake, 35, was the final guy left working, hunched over a handmade motorbike frame. Jake was authentic, work boots, faded trousers, and hands that demonstrated he truly made a living. In contrast to the polished business people my parents are constantly attempting to pair me with, he looked up and grinned. But it wasn't the staged smile I see at business events, it was sincere. It extended to his eyes. "Timing belt's about to go," he observed, having listened to my engine for less than a minute. "I can fix it now if you want to wait." Simple competence without any corporate language or ulterior motives. Even though I could hear my mother's disapproving voice in my mind about being in that neighborhood after dark, I found myself nodding. We chatted while he worked. Jake shared with me his experiences progressing from simple buying to more complex metal work, his aspirations to start his own custom fabrication business, and his passion for creating things by hand. He showed me the motorcycle he was restoring, which fused contemporary engineering with vintage design. My practice presentations about market expansion strategies seemed insignificant in comparison to the enthusiasm in his voice as he described the technical specifics. He said, "Want to see something cool?" He fixed my car and then showed me a part of the business with a number of finished projects. Every piece was distinct, the ideal fusion of creativity and utility. After years of moving papers in my corner office, I felt more a part of actual production as I ran my fingers over the beautiful curves of the metal. We ended up sipping coffee from the shop's antiquated vending machine and spoke until long after midnight. Jake told me about his upbringing with a single mother, who was a nurse, his time at community college studying his craft, and the joy he gets from making something enduring by hand. I started talking more about my life, including the oppressive expectations, the constant comparison to my sister, and the increasing sense that I was living someone else's fantasy. "You know," he began slowly, "metal's interesting. People think it's rigid, unchangeable. But with the right heat and pressure, it can become anything. Sometimes the most beautiful pieces come from metal that's been stressed and reformed. I did not fail to notice the metaphor. I've been seeing Jake practically every day since that night. After work, in the shop, he has been teaching me the fundamentals of welding. The process itself is immensely fulfilling. The concentration needed, the observable outcomes, the way two disparate parts are permanently fused together. In contrast, nothing feels real in the fleeting realm of business strategy. Jake took me on my first motorbike ride around Lake Michigan last weekend. There were no conference calls, shareholder expectations, or family pressures, just the wind, the road, and the sensation of being fully alive. The freedom was exhilarating. In Wisconsin, we made a stop at a tiny diner. The kind of establishment my mother would never enter. It was the best coffee I've ever had at any of Chicago's best eateries. Jake is taking me to meet his mother tomorrow. Despite being retired, she continues to volunteer at the nearby hospital. Instead of the required awe I give my parents at Sunday dinners, he speaks about her with such sincere love and respect. I've never been more anxious before a corporate presentation than I am now. What's coming? I know my folks will need to hear about Jake soon. My mother will weep. My father will threaten to cut me off, and my sister will be appalled. However, I'm prepared to make my own decisions. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm finally becoming the person I was destined to be, not the person my parents wanted me to be. When Jake smiles at me, perhaps having the guts to live genuinely is what true success looks like, rather than having a prominent location or corner office. I feel more alive than ever, yet I'm also scared. First update. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has changed. When I eventually told my parents about Jake, it was a complete disaster, worse than I could have imagined. I decided to tell them during our Sunday meal, which was required. My father's face went a shade of crimson I had never seen before when I revealed that Jake was a welder. My mother let her sterling silver fork fell to the exquisite china, clattering like a gunshot. The boom reverberated across our suddenly quiet dining room. My father spat the phrase, "A welder," as if it were toxic. "After everything we've invested in you, after all the connections I've built." For about 20 minutes, he launched into a tirade about family reputation and social status. My mother would alternate between giving me looks of complete betrayal and wiping her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. At first, my sister, who was there with her lawyer husband, genuinely chuckled, assuming it was a joke. Her face took on an expression of sheer fear as she realized I was genuine. She growled from the other side of the table. "You can't be serious. What about Richard from the golf club? His family's been asking about you." When I told them that I was thinking of quitting my corporate position to assist Jake in launching his custom fabrication company, the situation became heated. My father got to his feet so suddenly that his chair toppled over. "You are no longer welcome in this family if you pursue this absurd fantasy," he said, his voice shaking with anger. The peace that swept over me at hearing it was unexpected, but I had anticipated the threat. My sister's expensive outfit, my mother's exquisitely placed flowers, the oil paintings, and the crystal chandelier in the formal dining room all seemed to me to be of no use anymore. I said, "Then I guess this is goodbye," and got to my feet. Despite my mother's theatrical gasp, I kept gathering my belongings. My sister followed me into the foyer as I made my way to the door. She cautioned, "You're making a huge mistake. You're throwing away everything we were raised to be." "No," I said, getting stronger every step of the way. "I'm finally becoming who I really am." There have been many developments over the last 3 months. To the surprise of my coworkers, I left my corporate job. An emergency board meeting was called in response to my resignation letter, and my former employer continues to send me letters every week urging me to come back. Jake and I have been working tirelessly to launch our own company. In an industrial neighborhood, we discovered the ideal location. Although it needs some maintenance, there is a lot of potential. And the rent is fair. My commercial experience has proven surprisingly helpful in establishing our organization, and Jake's underwater welding talent has already drawn several significant clients. Jake's mother has provided the most surprising assistance. Warm, accepting, and truly interested in who I am rather than what she believes I should be, she is everything my mother is not. She arrived with homemade sandwiches and old trousers to assist us with painting the office area of our new store. I had never felt more at home in my parents' estate than I did when she embraced me, splattered with paint. Through her husband's legal practice, my sister issued me a formal letter last week requesting that I change my ways and rejoin the family. She reminded me of our family's reputation in Chicago society and provided a comprehensive list of available corporate jobs and eligible bachelors. I lit the new wood stove at our workshop using the letter. Finding a community I was unaware of has been the most unexpected development. We have been greeted warmly by our neighbors in the industrial area. We get coffee in the mornings from the car repair shop next door. And the local artists collective has already commissioned a number of custom metal works for their next show. Next month, Jake and I will tie the knot. There won't be a country club reception, a beautiful gown, or the society wedding my parents have been planning for me since I was born. In the workshop, surrounded by the things we've created together and the individuals who genuinely support us, we're holding a modest ceremony instead. The invitation was sent back unopened by my parents. Another legal letter from my sister threatened to declare me mentally incompetent. However, I can tell I've made the correct decision. When I watched Jake work, witnessed his commitment to his trade, and experienced the joy of creating something tangible, I saw my reflection on a polished metal piece this morning while assisting Jake with a challenging welding project. I felt more attractive and more like myself than ever before, even though I hardly recognized myself. Work boots, jeans, and almost pulled back hair. Even if my family no longer approves of me, I've gained authenticity, which is far more valuable in my new life. Every burn from hot metal, every callus on my hands, and every late-night business brainstorming session are all medals of glory. Second update. After 6 months of marriage, Jake and I have experienced some unexpected changes in our lives. The most exciting news is that Jake's underwater welding certification has opened up contracts we never thought were feasible. Due in large part to Jake's specialist abilities being in great demand for marine infrastructure projects, our tiny business has grown quicker than we could have imagined. We secured a significant underwater repair contract with the Chicago Port Authority last month. I recognize the irony. The same blue-collar jobs that my parents mocked now generate more money each year than my previous corporate job did. With more specialized tasks, our custom fabrication business is flourishing. And Jake's salary has risen to $150,000. However, success has presented unforeseen difficulties. Surprisingly, word of our expanding company made its way to my former corporate circles in Chicago's industrial area. My old coworkers have begun contacting me, some with sincere congrats, others with barely concealed interest in our small business. My former boss called last week to propose a consultancy arrangement. I declined courteously. Our appearance in a local business publication was the biggest step forward. The article highlighted our special blend of technical know-how and business savvy, with a focus on successful career transitions. For the first time in months, my sister texted me the morning it was released. The article was read by me. "Congratulations, I guess," she wrote. "Jake's mother is no longer only his mother-in-law. I've always hoped I had a parent like her. She frequently stops by the shop with handmade food and a sincere interest in what we do. She recently assisted us in setting up a training program for aspiring welders, a cause close to her heart after witnessing the transformative power of welding on her son's life. Our workshop has developed into a gathering place for the neighborhood. In addition to hiring 3 local apprentice welders, we have begun providing weekend workshops for those with an interest in metalworking. We have worked with a number of local artists on public art projects. And the owner of the car repair company next door sends his younger mechanics to learn from Jake. The work's physical demands have altered me in unexpected ways. Work clothes that are useful have taken the place of my luxury suits, which are still hanging unworn at the back of our wardrobe. I have developed muscles I never knew existed. And my hands are now calloused. There are more than just physical improvements, though. I now carry myself with a confidence that comes from doing something real rather than merely promoting papers. An unusual encounter occurred last week at our workshop. I was overseeing a delivery when a beautiful Mercedes arrived. My sister's husband came out, looking totally out of place in his fitted suit. His legal firm wants to hire us to do some underwater inspections on their marina properties. Therefore, he would bring a business proposal. It was an uncomfortable but illuminating conversation. He acknowledged that everyone was surprised by our achievement. He hesitated before departing, saying, "Your sister follows your business in the news, but your father still won't talk about it." "You seem different," he said to her. "Happier." "My mother would be horrified by the rhythm that has been established in our home life." We decided to put practicality ahead of elegance, and purchased a modest home in a developing neighborhood. Our furniture is a combination of items we welded ourselves and old treasures. Although the garden isn't as well kept as my parents' estate, it is thriving with herbs and vegetables that we utilize on a daily basis. The wedding pictures, which were taken by a local artist who captured the genuine moments, arrived lately rather than by a society photographer. One shows Jake and I in safety gear, totally focused on the task at hand as he teaches me how to weld an ornamental arch for the ceremony. Another depicts us dancing in the workshop with our chosen family and our creations. As I look at them, I see that we have created something that, in spite of their wealth, my parents never had: true happiness. We've begun discussing starting a family, which raises more questions. I consider the principles we wish to impart: the value of creating, pursuing your own path, engaging success based on fulfillment rather than prestige. My own parents have no idea that they could ever have grandkids, and Jake's mother breaks down whenever we bring up the subject. I found out yesterday that our workshop had received an invitation to my sister's forthcoming charity event. The note in the envelope wasn't what I expected, but it was addressed in her well-known handwriting. "I miss you," she sent. I haven't replied yet, but I said, "Maybe we could talk. A part of me understands that I can never return to my former self, but another part of me wants to make amends." Our most recent endeavor is a massive public artwork for the city that consists of several metal sculptures that symbolize change. I consider how much we've changed together as I watch Jake work on it, transforming metal into flowing shapes that seem to defy their material nature, me, from a corporate puppet to someone who at last feels real, and him, from a talented carpenter to a prosperous business owner. The silent moment when we all shut up in the workshop is the highlight of the day. Looking at what we've created, both the actual company and our life together, makes me feel accomplished in a way that no corporate success ever did. Even though my hands are rough today and my clothes smell like metal and honest labor, my heart is fuller than it was in my past existence. Life tends to come full circle. I hadn't seen my parents in more than a year until they unexpectedly dropped by our studio yesterday. They appeared smaller in some way. Northwestern's scandal had cost them dearly due to claims of harassment. My father, who was once a proud professor, was forced to leave the very thing they valued above all else. Their social standing had fallen apart. My mother's fancy shoes were totally out of place on the store floor, and they stood clumsily in our workspace. Their superbly designed clothing stood out sharply against the background of our welding tools and ongoing projects. First to speak, my father's voice lacked the authority it usually possessed. In between my mother's hardly contained cries, the story poured out. "We need your help." My sister's husband, the accomplished lawyer they had always commended, refused to assist until they paid his entire legal bill after the scandal surfaced. My sister sided with her husband. When they were unable to pay his rates, they were ordered to vacate the guest home at my sister's house, where they had been residing. My mother remarked sourly, "Your sister believes it will harm her reputation." The irony of what she said didn't escape my notice. After everything we did for her, I recalled all the times they had cautioned me that picking Jake would harm the family's reputation. My father surveyed our studio, his gaze resting on the honors we had just received for our unique workmanship. The wall was framed with an article from the local newspaper about our success. "From corporate to creative, local welding business makes waves," he said. Perhaps we could stay with you for a while?" With difficulty behind me, I sensed Jake's steady, encouraging presence. As usual, he quit his job, but he didn't get involved, so I was free to manage my family the way I wanted. That small gesture of respect and trust said a lot about our relationship. When I truly looked at my parents, I realized what they were no longer able to conceal. The flawless facade was crumbling, and the fine clothing was a little shabby. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, not because they had accepted me or my decisions. "No," I answered in a firm voice. "You can't stay with us. The phrase released something I had been holding on to for too long. Like a key turning in a lock. You threw me out of the family when I chose this life. You can't come back now just because you need something. My mom's face fell flat. She begged, but we. Your parents. A hint of my father's former authority emerged as his face darkened. After everything we've done for you. I cut in. That's exactly the problem. Everything you did was to control me, to make me fit your image of success. When I found my own way, you disowned me, and now that my way has proved successful, you want back in. I pointed to our workshop. See all this? The business you thought was beneath you. It's thriving. The husband you rejected, he's more successful than most of your country club friends. The life you said would embarrass the family? It's featured in business magazines. But that's different, countered my father. We can see now that you've made something of yourself. No. I interrupted him once more. That's not different at all. You still don't get it. I didn't need to prove anything. My worth isn't measured by income or social status. I'm happy because I'm finally living authentically, not because we're successful. After a while, they departed. My father, stiff with rage, and my mother in tears. As we saw their fancy car drive out, Jake gave me a hug. Simply. You okay? He inquired. I was more than fine. I had freedom. As we shut down the store later that night, I reflected on the path that had led me here, the corporate job I had detested, the familial pressure I had fled, the love I had discovered, and the company we had established. I had been moving toward myself with each step I took away from my parents' expectations. I came to a surprising realization while examining our most recent project. A sophisticated metal sculpture that the city had commissioned. Life occasionally requires extreme heat and pressure to create something beautiful, much like the metal we deal with. That heat had been my parents' rejection, and I had grown stronger and more authentic as a result. They failed to realize that they were giving me a cage by attempting to reintegrate me into their culture, regardless of how plated, with a partner who loves me for who I am, rather than what he wants me to be. My home is now here, surrounded by steel and sparkles. I appreciate the Reddit community's support during this trip. Your advice and support kept me going when I was having self-doubt. I'm thankful for this platform that allows me to share my story, because sometimes the most difficult decisions are the best ones. To everyone who must make similar decisions, remain loyal to who you are. Although the journey may be more difficult, the end result is worthwhile. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.